to listen in. So we're going to record this, but we're going to begin. Thanks everybody for joining us. My name is Bryce Bartell. We also have um, Sky Ellswood and Michael Hama. We're going to introduce each other or introduce ourselves in just a second. But to begin with, I want to introduce this this entire series. We sat down as a conference group a couple weeks ago and wanted to create a Zoom podcast webinar series as a precursor to a conference we're going to hold in March. The conference is about the religion of the first fathers, specifically seeking after the religion of the first fathers, with a conscious understanding that we don't have that yet. We don't have the religion of Abraham in its entirety. We don't have the religion of Noah. We don't have the religion of Adam. We have parts and pieces. So over the next 6 months, there's going to be 7 of these. Today is the first one. We're going to do one this month, which is today. We're going to do one in November, one in December, 2 in January, because there are 5 Sundays in January. And then we're going to do one in February and one in March. The title of the webinar series is God's Hand Moving. And I wanted to introduce it just for real quickly by talking about 2 different things. The first is we want to look at religion in general and God's work among mankind differently. We all come traditionally, unless we come from an Asian background, but traditionally we come from a church, cathedral, building, a background that originates from Europe. What we wanted to do is we wanted to reposition the camera a little bit, look at things from a different angle, and see if we can come to a different conclusion, different understanding. Now, the story that I wanted to introduce is there was a teenager and I'm going to get his name. There was a teenager, William McCoy, from Quebec, Canada. This was just a couple years ago, and he had a fascination about the Mayan people. He had found out that the Mayan civilization in the Yucatan Peninsula in Mexico and Guatemala and El Salvador they star mapped their cities. So if you understood the stars and you could connect back to a constellation or a star, you could actually find the city. So he tested a hypothesis. He got a lot of media attention. And he said, if this is true, if Maya really did star map their civilization, you should be able to find a city in this area. And he mapped a big jungle area in the Yucatan Peninsula in Central America. So he got some sponsorships, he got money. They took a helicopter and he lasered down so you could see among the floor of the jungle. And sure enough, exactly where he had aligned a star and a constellation, they found a city. So what we want to do today, and what we want to do over this podcast or this webinar, is we want to look at the gospel of Jesus Christ a little bit differently. Like star mapping, instead of getting a chisel and chopping down trees and being like a normal archaeologist, we're going to look at things a little bit differently and say, if this is true, then this also would be true, and see if we can uncover the hand of God and the fingerprints of God throughout time. And how does he work? And is it appropriate to the things that we do? We're going to use a lot of scriptures today and throughout this podcast series to identify that. In addition, one other thought. I know this is a sensitive topic because of all the devastation that has been happening up in the Northwest. But in addition to that, there's this concept of a fire tornado and revegetation. So when Moses led the children of Israel out of Egypt, one of the things that stopped Pharaoh and his armies was a fire tornado. They were at the brink, they were at the waters of the Red Sea, they didn't have anywhere to go, and God stopped Pharaoh. Now, there's a lot of symbolism there, but there also is some fascinating symbolism today with all of these fires. Now, again, not to take this lightly, it is a terrible thing. But what happened last year in Northern California was that fires emerged and wind emerged, and it ended up creating a fire tornado. A typical fire burns between 800 and 900 degrees Fahrenheit. When you whip up wind and you create a fire tornado, it burns much hotter. It's like welding. If you've ever welded metal and you push on the air and you're in a cauldron and you're pushing air and you're pulling it in, that type of fire burns between 2,000 and 3,000 degrees. Well, what happened last year in Northern California is that the air created a fire tornado, and it burned so hot that in a traditional fire, it actually is good for the landscape. It turns the wood into ash, the ash into soil, soil into nutrients, and a new forest or a new land blossoms as a result. Well, when you use a fire tornado, or when a fire tornado is created, it's so hot it burns the bacteria in the soil. And the ground becomes barren. And it becomes so barren that it turns into a wasteland. It turns into a desert. It takes decades for the revegetation to happen. Now, there's a way that you can bring that forest back sooner. If you bring a whole bunch of cows and you put a whole bunch of hay on the ground and let the cows graze and re-soil from the cow's own manure, you actually can bring that forest back to what it was much quicker. So in Northern California, you could do that. Now, the reason why we're talking about these two things at the beginning of this webinar series is twofold. If, like star mapping, if God's fingerprints are on something, we should be able to align what God is doing and how God works based off of how he maps his work, how his fingerprints are. Second, sometimes the ground gets barren, and it's either the choice of man or the choice of God. God can actually remove things and make it so things don't grow. If we bring in some new pieces of information, new knowledge, new wisdom, new soil from intense grazing, the wisdom that can be brought in maybe can re-soil some barren ground. So that's really the goal of today and for the next 7 months, or 6 months, excuse me, is to re-look at the gospel of Jesus Christ in the context of how does God work, and is there some wisdom that we can bring into this? So what I'd like to do is, I'd love for Mike and Sky to introduce themselves, maybe give a 30 to 60 second background about yourself, where you're from, maybe your family a little bit, And then I'll do myself as well, and we'll go from there.
All right. Sky, you want to go first?
Sure. And I just wanted to say, Bryce, thank you for inviting us to do this. And even though I'm not part of the committee for the upcoming conference, Bryce put this together and put the scriptures together and has the ideas and invited us to have some good dialogue. And I think that's great. I think that having these conversations and opening up our minds to these concepts and these questions hopefully will soil or nourish our soil. So just had to say that real quick. Anyway, I'm Sky Ellswood. We're in the South Jordan region. I have 4 children. I'm married to Justin Ellswood. That's about it.
Perfect.
All right.
That's great.
Yep. And so I'm Mike Hamill. Me and my wife Amy, we live in Oxnard, California. It's about an hour and a half outside of LA. We live out here with our 3 kids, and yep, we're do what we can.
Okay, wonderful. And both of them have great insights that they're going to share today. And throughout this entire conversation, Sky and Michael, feel free to jump in, add some thoughts. There are some areas that both of them are going to take over for a few minutes, but throughout this entire conversation, please step in and add thoughts as the Spirit guides. In addition, everyone that's a part of the webinar, there is a question and answer box on the side. Feel free to ask things. If you have a question, if you have a comment, I'll look over and I'll pay attention to the Q&A throughout. We'll either start or stop in the middle of what we're doing if it's related to the topic that we're talking on, or we will hold on tight and do it at the end, okay? Depending on, if it's what we're talking about.
Perfect. Just so you know, I can't see that. So just so everyone knows, I don't see the Q&A. So
yeah, I think it's just me.
Okay.
Okay. So what I'd love to do is we're going to jump in, and I'm going to make sure that, okay. The title of this first webinar is The Vineyard of the Lord. What we want to do is we want to talk about how God works. We know that God is the same yesterday, today, and forever. He doesn't change. Oh, just one second. Let me, I think we have okay, is that better? Are you seeing my full screen or just the first screen?
Let's see. I am seeing.
I think I see your full
See
screen.
the slideshow. Yeah, I'm not sure how to tell if it's the full screen.
Okay, is that better?
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah, that's good.
Great. All right, you got to see my notes, so you know what's coming. All right, so the first thing that we're going to talk about is the vineyard of the Lord. How does the Lord work? Is it typical? Is he the same yesterday, today, and forever? And if he does something, does he do it in a certain way, a certain order, and a certain method? So let's begin and let's start talking. The first thing that we need to come to an agreement on is, what is the gospel of Jesus Christ? By starting there, we can build a foundation and agree that there is a gospel, but it's built on something. So we're going to talk about Adam and Eve for a second, because it all starts there. And we're going to jump into the second book of Nephi, chapter 1, paragraph 9 and 10. This is all based off of the Restoration Scriptures. So I'm going to read here, and we're going to talk about this. Paragraph 9, and I, Lehi, according to the things which I have read, must needs suppose that an angel of God, according to that which is written, had fallen from heaven. Wherefore he became a devil, having sought that which was evil before God. And because he had fallen from heaven and had become miserable forever, he sought for the misery of all mankind. Wherefore he said unto Eve, yea, even that old serpent, which is the devil, which is the father of all lies, wherefore he said, partake of the forbidden fruit, and ye shall not die, but ye shall be as God, knowing good and evil. And Adam and Eve had partaken. And after Adam and Eve had partaken of the forbidden fruit, they were driven from the Garden of Eden to till the earth. And they have brought forth children, yea, even the family of all the earth. And the days of the children of men were prolonged according to the will of God, that they might repent while in the flesh. Now I'm going to skip down to the top of paragraph 10. And now behold, if Adam had not transgressed, he would not have fallen, but would have remained in the Garden of Eden. Okay, so I'm going to finish there. Why do we start with Adam and Eve? Well, Adam is an archetype. Adam is a person, Michael the archangel, but he's also each one of us. And Eve is the mother of all living, but she's also represented in all women. And we chose to come here, here in mortality. We all have partaken of the fruit at some time. The only one who is sinless is Christ. So everyone has partaken of the fruit. We are under law here, and we have, because we are under law, we have all sinned, and we have made that choice. And we personally have been cast out of the presence of God, just like Adam and Eve. So as we start thinking about, okay, so let's build this foundation. Each one of us, I am Adam, Michael is Adam, Sky is Eve. We are all these individuals, and we represent, or we've all been cast out. But there is an Adam and there is an Eve. Now, let's talk about this a little bit further. What then is the gospel of Jesus Christ? This comes from Mormon chapter 4. Behold, he created Adam, and by Adam came the fall of man. And because of the fall of man came Jesus Christ, even the Father and the Son. And because Jesus Christ came the redemption of man. And because the redemption of man, which came by Jesus Christ, they are brought back into his presence. Yea, this is where all men are redeemed. So the redemption is being brought back into the presence of God. That is the gospel of Jesus Christ. We came down to earth. We partook of the fruit by sinning, whatever that was or is, or those things. And the redemption is to be brought back into the presence of God. That is the gospel of Jesus Christ. So as we start thinking about, okay, if the gospel of Jesus Christ is individual redemption, is that it? Where we are individually walking back to Eden. We are walking back to the tree of life. There is a process to do that. That process includes following the Holy Ghost, getting a commission and following Christ as our lawgiver and our redeemer, being brought all the way back to the tree of life. And that right there is redemption. That is a individual redemption. Now, within the gospel of Jesus Christ, there's individual redemption, but there's also group redemption. So Eden was a conduit. It was a temple. It was a garden that shared land, shared territory with heaven. And it allowed Adam and Eve to walk with God in the cool of the day. Now, when there's anything authentic from heaven, you're going to be able to see the signature of that authenticity in the process or the communication, the channel of walking back into the presence of God individually and as a community. So let's read. This is a TNC 82, paragraph 13. And now this Moses plainly taught to the children of Israel in the wilderness, and sought diligently to sanctify his people, that they may behold the face of God, but they hardened their hearts and could not endure his presence. Therefore the Lord, in his wrath, for his anger was kindled against them, swore that they should not enter into his rest, which rest is the fullness of his glory while in the wilderness. So there's two redemptions. There is an individual redemption and there is a group redemption. It is bringing you back to the tree of life. It is bringing a group back to Eden. Now, though that is the gospel of Jesus Christ. The gospel of Jesus Christ is coming back into the presence of God. You can see this through time. In the first picture at the bottom, this is Egypt. Egypt had gods. They had Ra and Horus and had a pantheon of individuals. They even had a process that they undertook. But it wasn't until God claimed a people that you could build a tabernacle and then eventually a temple. In the temple was the abode of God. God visited or was behind the Holy of Holies, and that was a point on earth where God could connect with man. But the goal is that a society, a people, a Zion, is going to connect with heaven again. And that is an individual, or that is a group redemption. Okay. So if we can agree that this is the gospel of Jesus Christ, walking back to Eden and reconnecting heaven and earth, then what is the requirement? What is the element of Christ? Well, we know that in order to do that, there needs to be an atonement made, or the sin, the evil, the corruption could not be withdrawn or relieved for us to make the walk back to the tree and make the ascension up into Zion. So let's start here. This is 2 Nephi 1. This is the same scriptures, just lower down in the chapter. And because they are redeemed from the fall, they are free forever, knowing good from evil, to act for themselves and not to be acted upon, save it be by the punishment of the law at the great and last day, according to the commandments which God hath given. Wherefore men are free according to the flesh, and all things are given them which are expedient unto man, and they are free to choose liberty and eternal life through the great mediator of all men, or choose captivity and death according to the captivity and power of the devil, for he seeketh that all men might be miserable like unto himself. So we have this process. We've been cast out of heaven. We've been cast out of the presence of God, where we walked and talked with God in the cool of the day. We now have a process to go back to the tree of life and a process to elevate an entire society so that the heavens can connect back to the earth. This is a requirement, is to have your sins cleansed through the blood of the Son, so that we can relieve ourselves of the debts that we've taken within this mortal experience. So if we can agree that that is the gospel of Jesus Christ, then what would we see? How would this work? How does God interact with man? Well, let's go back to Adam, the first man, and let's talk about him, because if this is the echo, or this is the way that God works, well, the first thing is that man connects back to heaven. Adam became the first prototype of the saved man. We talked about the prototype of the saved man, and that is Jesus Christ. But Adam became the first prototype of the saved man. He got cast out of the Garden of Eden. He had to come and till the earth. He raised up seed. He worked by the sweat of his own brow. But he was able to bring himself back into the presence of God, and he was able to bring a group of people back into the presence of God before he died. So right here, this is at the end of Adam's life. We don't have all of the account of Adam. We do have this account. So I'm fairly positive that he had other interactions with the heavens before this. But this essentially communicates that he was able to do both of those things. He was able to bring himself back to the presence of heaven and God, and bring a group of people. So this is from TNC 154. 3 years previous to the death of Adam, he called Seth, Enos, Canaan, Mahalalel, Jared, Enoch, and Methuselah, who were all high priests, with the residue of his posterity who were righteous, in the valley of Adam on Diamond, and there bestowed upon them his last blessing. And the Lord appeared unto them, and they rose up and blessed Adam and called him Michael, the prince, the archangel, the Lord. And the Lord administered comfort unto Adam and said unto him, I have set you to be the head. A multitude of nations shall come of you, and you are a prince over them forever. And Adam stood up in the midst of the congregation, and notwithstanding he was bowed down with age, being full of the Holy Ghost, predicted whatsoever should befall his posterity unto the latest generation. Okay. Now, is this the gospel of Jesus Christ? Is this what God does? Is this his handiwork? Is this his authorship? Does he bring individuals and groups of people back into his presence for individual salvation and for group salvation? I want to say that is the gospel of Jesus Christ. And anything less than that is not the gospel of Jesus Christ. Anything that is preparatory, or anything that is the principles, is not the gospel of Jesus Christ. The gospel of Jesus Christ brings the individual to Christ, to converse with him, to talk to him, and then ultimately brings a group of people back into the presence of God, to reconnect heaven and earth through Eden. Now, Adam was this first prototype. He did it. He accomplished it. He accomplished his own salvation after getting cast out. He accomplished the salvation of a handful of families. That brought them all back into the presence of Christ, in the valley of Adam, in the presence of son Amen. Now, what then happens? What is the process by which God works? Well, we're going to change, and we're going to talk in some different language about how God interacts with man. The first thing that he does is he needs to find that individual, and it's really not an individual, it's a pair. And we're going to talk about the pair. It's Adam and Eve. You cannot have Adam without Eve, and you can't have Eve without Adam. But you have a couple or an individual that ascends up the mountain, connects back to heaven for their own personal salvation, and then heaven gives them the opportunity to build a family and a house around them as a presiding father or a mother here on earth. They create houses and families. So we're going to talk about that today. We're going to talk about houses and families. So let's go. let's go right here. This is from Galatians. We're actually going to read two paragraphs or two scriptures related to this. The first is to the letter to the Galatians in the New Testament. And it says, as we have therefore opportunity, let us do good unto all men, especially unto them who are the household of faith. And you see how large a letter I have written unto you with my own hand. So the first thing is we're going to talk about the household of faith.
Can I insert something?
Yeah.
So when I was reading the scriptures that you sent me the other day, I read this one and it reminded me of the answer to covenant. So if I can just start at verse 23, and I'll read 23 and 24, and then I'll reference what it reminded me of. So 23, brethren, if a man be overtaken in a fault, you who are spiritual, restore such an one in the spirit of meekness, considering yourself, lest you also be tempted. Bear one another's burdens, and so fulfill the law of Christ. For if a man think himself to be something when he is nothing, he deceives himself. But let every man prove his own work, and then shall he have rejoicing in himself alone, and not in another. For every man shall bear his own burden. Let him that is taught in the word share with him that teaches in all good things. Be not deceived. God is not mocked. For whatever a man sows, that shall he reap also. For he that sows to his flesh shall of the flesh reap corruption. But he that sows to the Spirit shall of the Spirit reap life everlasting. And let us not be weary in well-doing, for in due season we shall reap if we faint not. And then this is the end that you read. As we therefore have opportunity, let us do good unto all, especially unto them who are of the household of faith. You see how large a letter I have written unto you with my own hand. All right, so when I first read this just stuck out to me. So this is on page 8 of the Answer to Covenant. Be of one heart and regard one another with charity. Measure your words before giving voice to them, and consider the hearts of others. Although a man may err in understanding concerning many things, yet he can view his brother with charity and come unto me, and through me he can have patience to overcome the world. I can bring him to understanding and knowledge. Therefore, if you regard one another with charity, then your brother's error in understanding will not divide you. I lead all to truth. I will lead all who come to me to the truth of all things. So I think that this is very pertinent. If we want to be members of a house, we need to conduct ourselves that way. And I think there's instructions on how to do that. So just had to throw that in there.
No, I love it, Sky. Mike, do you have any thoughts about it?
Not at the moment. I'm still looking at formulating some other thoughts at present, but I appreciate what you shared, Sky.
No, I think, Sky, you're spot on. If you invite anybody to your house, you can invite friends, you can invite help, somebody to help you clean your house, or cousins or children or anybody to your house. There's a set of rules within that house. And the set of rules within your house, maybe it's to take off the shoes so you don't muddy the carpets. Maybe it's not to yell or scream or call people names or tell people to shut up. But whenever there is an invitation to a house, to your house, there is an implicit and explicit set of guidelines and rules, so that those who are part of the house can occupy it and not have to worry about dirtied floors and angry people. But I'm going to continue on with the next one, and this comes from the letter to the Ephesians, talking about the same thing. Now, therefore, you are no more strangers and foreigners, but fellow citizens with the saints and of the household of God, and are built upon the foundation of apostles and prophets, Jesus Christ himself being the chief cornerstone, in whom all the building fitly framed together grows unto a holy temple in the Lord, in whom also are built together for a habitation of God through the Spirit.
I also had another thought with this one. So if we look at that closely, the temple of the Lord is a house, but they're talking about people right here. So I think this illustrates your point a lot, Bryce, is Jesus Christ himself being the chief corner, in whom all the building fitly framed together grows into a holy temple in the Lord, in whom you also are built together. So that reminded me of the build a house parable and temples. Is this all something that is a structure, or is this something that is a household? Anyway.
Yeah. Well, and I want to take a thought on the framework that this is setting up: apostles, prophets, and Jesus Christ. An apostle is someone who has had face time with Christ. It is someone who has been in his presence, and God, Christ, has given them instruction. A prophet is the same thing, but sees future looking and prophesies, but that prophecy is coming from the voice and face of God. So if we start thinking about this household, I can go on vacation and I can allow a brother, a cousin, a friend to come in and occupy my house. And I tell them, hey, please mow the lawn and make sure that, the toilet flushes, so play with the handle. And I can give some face-to-face instruction about the house so that they are well aware of what needs to happen within that house. Outside of that face-to-face instruction, I don't know what those individuals are doing to my house. So that's why it is necessarily important for, if there is a foundation, that foundation is represented based off of personal contact with the owner of the house. Okay. Now let's keep on going. The next is we're gonna switch between the house and then the family, because there is a difference, and we're going to talk about the difference. A household, you can invite anyone to a house. Friends, my kids have friends around the corner. They come in and play. My kids have play dates. I have friends. My wife has friends. We have family members. We have cousins. We have other neighbors. But then there is a degree higher, and that degree higher is actual members of the family. The way that I interact with my son and the way I interact with my daughters and my expectations related to them in the house are different. And their ownership and possession of the house is ultimately different as well. So let's read this just for a second. This is in the letter to the Hebrews. And jumping down to the middle of the paragraph, for it became him for whom all things are all things, and by whom are all things, in bringing many sons and daughters unto glory, to make the captain of their salvation perfect through sufferings. Okay, I'm going to keep on going. There's actually 3 scriptures I want to talk about related to being a member of the household. A member of the family, excuse me. We're going to change out these vocabulary terms between household and family. This is in TNC 82, paragraph 16. For whosoever is faithful unto obtaining these 2 priesthoods which I have spoken, and magnifying their call, are sanctified by the Spirit, unto the renewing of their bodies. They become the sons of Moses and of Aaron and the seed of Abraham and the church and kingdom and the elect of God. Okay, so we now have a progression. We're going from household to seed. We're going to become members of the family. In part of the members of the family, there is a renewing of a body. This is not a figurative thing. There's a renewing of a body and a new name given because now you're a member of the seed. My brother adopted a little boy from foster care 5-6 years ago. When they finished the transaction at the judge and the law, the courts, and the little boy was officially a member of their family, they did something, and I honestly don't remember what his original name was, but the little boy was young enough that they gave him a new name. His new name went to Luke. He was then brought into the family. The little boy had trauma with his dad was in, his biological dad was in prison. His mother was a heroin addict or speed or some sort of methamphetamine. So he had a lot of trauma, and the new name was perfectly acceptable to the little boy, and he became Luke. He became a member of the family. This is the process. By becoming a member of the family, you actually do change your row from left to right, so that when you ascend up the pathway and become a member of the family, you go from becoming a son of Moses and of Aaron to seed of Abraham and the church and kingdom and elect of God. Now, there's a lot of flowery language there, and lots of times we get distracted with that. But this process of becoming family members within a house is incredibly important. Okay, so this is what happened within Adam. This was Adam, the first father. He received a family. He received a house. He made the ascent himself, and then he was in a position to guide others and even a group of his descendants to do the same. Now, this is how it's been done throughout time. You have these fathers who receive this right from heaven, essentially a surrogate to our father and mother in heaven. Adam and Eve are a reflection of God the Father and God the Mother. Seth and his wife are a reflection of Adam and Eve, which were a reflection of Adam, which were a reflection of Heavenly Father and Heavenly Mother. The same is true with Noah and his wife, and so on. It's a pattern, it's a method that God uses throughout time to establish these families by covenant on earth so that they can perpetuate a house or a household of faith so that more can be brought into the family. So, how do we know? How do we know if somebody is legit? How do we know if somebody has this blessing? What is the evidence? What is the fingerprints? How would we identify the appropriate candidate, evaluate the appropriate resume, and understand if there is somebody that has this? And why is that even important? Let's talk about that here. We're going to talk over the next couple of slides about the resume of a father and a mother. First of all, the resume begins with sacrifice. You cannot receive anything from heaven without sacrifice. You cannot receive a paycheck based off of the words or the calling or responsibility that you think that you have, and count that as sacrifice. It's just not there. So the first is you're proven by God by sacrifice. So I'm gonna, there was one more, and I'll skip it because of we already talked about it. But this is back to the family. This is Alma talking about the order, the holy order after the order of the Son of God. I'd highly recommend it in the LDS edition. It's chapter 12-13 of Alma, but that's related to the last topic. But let's go here. This is talking about Abraham. Abraham chapter 1, paragraph 1. In the Teachings and Commandments, it's in section 145. We put it in the Teachings and Commandments because it is a revelation. So let's go here. In the land of Chaldees, at the residence of my father, I, Abraham, saw that it was needful for me to obtain another place of residence. And finding there was greater happiness and peace and rest for me, I sought for the blessings of the fathers, and the right whereunto I should be ordained to administer the same, having been myself a follower of righteousness, desiring also to be one who possessed great knowledge, and to be a greater follower of righteousness, and to possess a greater knowledge, and to be a father of many nations, a prince of peace, and desiring to receive instructions, and to keep the commandments of God, I became a rightful heir, a high priest holding the right belonging to the fathers. It was conferred upon me from the fathers. It came down from the fathers from the beginning of time, yea, even from the beginning, or before the foundation of the earth. To the present time, even the right of the firstborn, or the first man, who is Adam, or first father, through the fathers unto me. I sought for my appointment unto the priesthood according to the appointment of God unto the fathers concerning the seed. Okay. What is Abraham doing? What is the importance of this?
I have an idea.
Oh, I love it.
He is looking for instruction and looking to follow instruction from God. He's not freelancing. He's not declaring himself something because he feels he is that thing. He is following after righteousness. And in the path of doing so, after he has made those sacrifices conforming to God's will, not his own, then he received this position from God. And he gets it from God. He didn't get a feeling about it. He didn't assume, so I think that's really important for us to realize that he was putting his own will, his own choices, his own mind in check to the will of the Father. And he was seeking after it and conforming to it. He didn't just read some scriptures and just assume, oh, yep, I'm the favorite, I must be in this position, some guy really liked what I said, so this is me. No, he waited on the Lord, and he continued to seek after righteousness. I mean, he repeats it. He says, having been myself a follower of righteousness, desiring also to be one who possessed great knowledge, and to be a greater follower of righteousness. So he's continuing on. He's still pushing. He's still seeking after the Lord to get this blessing, and he doesn't claim that he has it until he receives it from the Lord himself. So I think that's really important to take note of.
Yeah. Thanks, Sky. And just to continue to what you're saying, I believe it's related to the quality of salvation. This is where, people get tripped up. Is there a quality of salvation? The answer is absolutely. There is a quality of salvation. There is a difference between someone who wakes up in the morning and lives their day without thought and goes back to sleep at night, compared to someone who is actively seeking, searching, feasting on the words of Christ, and becoming more like God. As I read this, Abraham is looking to follow the archetype. He is looking to follow the gods in heaven, and he's looking to be one of them. He's looking to receive the same right, to have the same quality of salvation, to receive greater commandments so that he can receive greater knowledge. So Abraham is in this position of desire, growth, and he is willing to make sacrifice. That is the first sign. If you don't see sacrifice, legitimate sacrifice, if it's not uncomfortable, if it didn't displace you, if it didn't do something that made you question whether you should have done that, or that removed a praise of the world type treat, you can know that that's probably not something from heaven. But the very first thing must be proven by God by sacrifice. The next is the individual or people, the individual, well, let's start with because we're doing the resume of the father and the mother. The individual who possesses this is because they climb the mountain themselves and can look backward and say, over there, that's the trail. And you know what? That's a ditch over there. You're going to fall. And over there, there's something else to be conscious of. Because this person, have done it, and now I'm turning back and guiding you to it. Let me read this. This is from First Nephi chapter 2. And it came to pass, after I prayed unto the Lord, I beheld a large and spacious field. And it came to pass that I beheld a tree whose fruit was desirable to make one happy. And it came to pass I did go forth and partake of the fruit thereof, and beheld that it was most sweet above all that I'd ever before tasted. Yea, and I beheld that fruit thereof was white, to exceed all the whiteness that I had ever seen. Lehi is in this position where Lehi had followed a man in a white robe that he thought was an angel. That man that he followed a man, took him into darkness. It didn't take him to the tree. By following a man, it took Lehi into darkness. Lehi then had to do an about face, pray to God, what should I do? That took him to the tree. He now is in a possession of having foresight, understanding, knowledge, experience, and wisdom, where he can turn to his family, because that's the first place that you go, is your family, and he invites them to come along as well. But he's not doing this based off of conjecture. He's not doing this based off of a hope or a desire. He's doing this based off of knowledge. Okay. Now,
can I make another observation with the
yeah,
tree?
yeah.
So he ends up partaking of the fruit, and so does Nephi. But there are others that hold on to the rod and arrive to the tree, but because they're looking around at other people's opinions and judgments, they're ashamed and they don't partake of the fruit. And so that's an interesting scenario. You know, if you've held on for so long and you finally get to the tree, what does it matter what other people think? What does it matter, what the majority says or the group is? I mean, the majority of people didn't partake, but they also didn't receive the fruit. So just wanted to throw that in there.
Yeah, no, that's great. Okay, so we have the first resume item, if you're looking through the resume, is there sacrifice? The second is, have they been to the tree? Do they have that understanding and experience of what was required to get there? The third is there a pair? Is there a pair? Is it a covenant? It's necessary. God is not a single man. God is married. God has a wife, and the wife of God has a husband. I'm going to read about Sarah, Abraham's wife, and I want to point out a couple things that are very interesting. This comes from Genesis. This is from the Genesis chapter 7. Again, these are the scriptures that are new scriptures that have the complete Joseph Smith translation in it. And it's chapter 7, paragraph 4 and 5. And it came to pass when he had come near to enter into Egypt, that he said unto Sarai, his wife, she wasn't yet Sarah, she didn't have the H yet, behold, now I know you to be a fair woman to look upon. Therefore I shall come to it shall come to pass when the Egyptians shall see you, that they shall say, this is his wife, and they will kill me, but they will save you alive. Yes, I pray you unto them, I am his sister, and it may be well with me for your sake, and my soul shall live because of you. Now, this is a really interesting scripture. Why am I using it? Let me skip down. The princes also of Pharaoh saw her and commanded her to be brought before Pharaoh. And then going down to paragraph 5, and the Lord plagued Pharaoh and his house with a great plague because of Sarai, Abram's wife. And Pharaoh called Abram and said, what have you done unto me in this thing? Why did you not tell me that she was your wife? Okay, I'm going to take and depart from this story a little bit, that the normal narrative. And I want to make a comparison. When Eli and his sons lost the Ark of the Covenant to the Philistines, something happened. The Philistines took the Ark of the Covenant back to their nation, and plague happened. You can think of Indiana Jones and the first one where they open up the Ark of the Covenant and all the things come, if you ever seen that movie. But plague came. Well, Abraham didn't have an Ark of the Covenant, but he did have a wife, and she is a tabernacle, and was Sarah his Ark of the Covenant. The results were the same. There was plague or great plagues when the Pharaoh, who most likely was the most... Why did God send Abram to Pharaoh? It's probably because Pharaoh was the most noteworthy individual in that society at that time. It's like going to the White House or going to wherever. And God took Abram at the time and said, go show what you have, Abraham. Show him your authorities and your covenants and blessings. Well, what happened next is this is just down same chapter. And God said unto Abraham, for Sarai your wife, you shall not call her Sarai, but Sarah. You shall call her name. And I will bless her, and I will give you a son of her. Yea, I will bless her, and she shall be blessed. The mother of nations, the kings and people shall be of her. Okay? This is a pretty powerful blessing. So, if you're going to create a resume, the first section is their sacrifice. Second section, has this person done it? Have they experienced redemption, been brought back into the presence of God? Have they followed the example of Adam, the first prototype of the saved man, and brought himself back into the presence of God? Second, are there two of them? Is there a man and a woman? And then the third, or excuse me, I'm fourth or fifth at this point. Do they have knowledge? Because once that happens, once you bring the woman together, you now have a family. This picture right here is of Nephi. I'm going to talk about it in just a second. I'm going to read this. You have TNC 69. This is equal to 76 in the Doctrine and Covenants of the LDS. I, the Lord, am merciful and gracious unto them who fear me, and delight to honor them who serve me in righteousness and truth. Great shall be the reward, and eternal shall be their glory, and unto them will I reveal all my mysteries, yea, all the hidden mysteries of my kingdom. From days of old, for ages to come, will I make known unto them the good pleasure of my will concerning all things to come. Yea, even the wonders of eternity shall they know, and things to come will I show them, even the things of many generations. So I want to continue to talk about this resume. So Nephi received a knowledge of his entire line all the way until its destruction, and then it hopped over to the coming of the Gentiles into the American continent. But he was able to see the mysteries. Again, this was the resume that God had, or this was knowledge that was given to this individual. Now, there's a couple questions. I'm going to pause just for a second. So one was, there are different qualities of partaking of the fruit, like salvation. That is true. It's not what we're talking about this second. We're going to talk about that in just a second. But what we're talking about now is that God uses redeemed individuals who have received the blessings of heaven, to allow others to pave the path up the mountain so that they too can receive it as well. These are some of the elements that you'd see within individuals like that. Okay? The last one is that they do establish a house and a family. So I'm going to read one scripture about that. Oh, just did that. Okay. This is from 2 Nephi chapter 5. Hearken to me, ye that follow after righteousness. Look unto the rock from whence ye are hewn, and to the hole of the pit from whence ye are digged. Look unto Abraham your father, and Sarah, she that bare you. For I called him alone and blessed him. For the Lord shall comfort Zion, he will comfort all her waste places, and he will make her wilderness like Eden, and her desert like the garden of the Lord. Joy and gladness shall be found therein, thanksgiving and the voice of melody. Hearken unto me, my people, and give ear unto me, O nation, for a law shall proceed from me, and I will make my judgment to rest for a light for my people. Okay? Look unto Abraham. Why did it say that? Why did it say, look unto Abraham from the rock from whence you are hewn? I want to take a step back. Oh, Sky, did you have something?
Isn't it Christ saying, hearken unto me, ye that follow after righteousness?
Yes, hearken unto me, ye that follow unto righteousness. Look unto the rock from whence you are hewn. Thank you.
Okay.
Why did that happen? Why is God saying, look unto the rock from which ye are hewn? Hearken unto me, look unto the rock from whence ye are hewn. Look unto Abraham your father, and Sarah, she that bare you.
Well, I think that Abraham and Sarah relay the messages from God. So if you're seeking after righteousness, you're going to hearken unto Christ. And if there are messengers that are going to bring you to Christ, their message will resonate with the messages that are from Christ in the scriptures.
Yeah.
It reminds me of a part in the Answer to Covenant too, where it says, I should have wrote it down. Something to the effect of that there's no other way to uncover certain truths unless you follow the commandments of Christ. And I find that to be true. I think that when we earnestly attempt to live up to the Sermon on the Mount, the Sermon at Bountiful, these different scriptures in Christ, when we are reconciling our thoughts and our actions and our words, and I screw up all the time, but when we take the time to reconcile, okay, this is what was asked of me, this is how I behaved, or this is what's asked of me, how can I change my thoughts, how can I change my behavior to align with this? I think that as we begin to practice that, our discernment of what Christ is really asking of us will become a lot more clearer. And it's not, look upon, what your friend does and their opinion of what the gospel is, and look upon what, your family's church says or your traditions. No, it's hearken unto me, ye that follow after righteousness. Look to Abraham and to Sarah, the declarers of this message that comes from me. So some of this might sound obvious, but I think we miss it sometimes because we hear it so much and we think, oh yeah, I do that all the time. But do we really? How many different people throughout the whole history of the world has thought they were following God and thought they were doing just great, and turns out they weren't. And they never stopped or slowed down to say, hey, this is what's being asked and this is what I'm doing. Really, we need to put ourselves in check.
Perfect. Love it. When we have God vouching for other people, we need to take notice of it. God is vouching for Abraham. He's vouching for Sarah. He vouched for Adam in the valley of Adam and Diamond. He vouched for Nephi. He vouched for his apostles. He Peter, James, and John. When God is vouching for someone, we should probably take notice of it. If we think of God's vineyard, and there are multiple trees within that vineyard, and there are individuals given to that tree, there's a reason why this image is two doves in a tree. When God gives a tree or a family to a couple, God vouches for that couple. That couple has become the prototype of the saved man and woman of that generation. They have cut a rock out from whence their family and their house are hewn. And God has vouched for them, so much so that he's even given them the right to potentially claim the garden for a period of time, given them the right to operate within that garden as the father and the mother, the surrogate of God the Father and God the Mother. So we have this pathway. Is this the way God works? Do we see it in Scripture? Is it a method? Is it a reflection of heaven? Well, let's go to the next one. And this actually, Sky, this is turns over to you.
Okay, yeah. So I wrote it down, or well, I'll start over. So I shared a dream that I had with Bryce and some others at a fellowship a couple months back. But the part that I had shared was actually the third part of the dream. And I'm going to share the whole dream this time. Bryce felt that this had a similar message to the topic that he wanted to do this webinar for. But he hasn't heard the first and the second. And there might be, I'm not exactly sure what this all means and what it doesn't. And so I hope no one thinks I'm proclaiming some message when I share this. I'm just sharing the dream because it seems to be similar to the topic that we're discussing. So with that disclosure, it started with me walking up to a woman that apparently I had known. She was homeless and she was older. And oh shoot, maybe I should look down. Sorry, maybe I should look down at my writing just so I don't screw it up. Hold on, bear with me. Sorry.
You're just fine. Take your time.
Okay. Okay. All right. So the third part took place in the ocean, but once I had entered the third part, I had realized that even though the first two were on land, they had still taken place in the ocean. So if that makes sense, you know how dreams, it kind of makes sense, it kind of doesn't. So anyway, when we get to the third part, I realized that the two beginning parts had also taken place in the ocean, but there was just land on the ocean. All right, so at the beginning of the first, I was walking up to an old homeless woman that I had spoken to and seen before. She began to tell me she didn't have a place to live or food or clothing. She expressed that she was hungry and cold. I felt a lot of compassion for her and wanted to help her and wished that I could. Then all of a sudden it switched scenes and I was in this body shop, like for vehicles, like when you go to a mechanics and they have the lift or whatever and they can put cars up there, but instead it was for houses. And it was these small houses. And I was standing next to these people that were working on it, and these people owned this body shop. They owned the houses, but it wasn't a company. It was like almost like a charity, but it wasn't an official organization. They were people that had, at one point in time, they didn't have houses themselves, but because of sacrifices that had been made for them, they did have houses. And because of that, it was in their heart to provide the same for others. And so they had this body shop and they would make these houses. And anyway, there was this house on this hydraulic lift, and they were taking out the flooring and taking out the insulation because apparently one of the people who had stayed in this house before had contaminated it. And this man was telling me that a lot of times that they'll provide the houses for people and they'll abandon them, or they'll have the opportunity for a while and then they turn away from it. And I remember just being surprised at how much sacrifice went into creating these houses and reaching out to these people. And they would provide them clothing, but they would also provide them almost like a family support and encouragement and guidance if they asked for it. And it was an emotional thing for these people because they were genuinely trying to help these people. Anyway, so well, let's see. Okay, so then it goes back to, I went back to this other scene where I see this older woman, and I said, "Oh, how are things going?" And she said, "Oh, great. They've built me this house." And I noticed that she had on these really good quality clothing, and I complimented her on it and said, "Oh, these look really warm. This looks like, really good quality." And she's like, "Oh yeah, but they're not really my style." She didn't really like the fashion. And I was like, "Okay." And she said, "Yeah, they've given me this house and all of these things, which is great. But what's even better is I'm going to be able to sell it. And this person's going to give me all of this money." And I was surprised and also saddened by what she was telling me, because I had spoke to the people who were building the houses before, and I understood where their heart was coming from and what their intentions were for these people. And she didn't even recognize it. She couldn't see past the enticings that she had to recognize the opportunity that was there. And anyway, let me go back to, oh well, I guess that's that part of the dream. So I just at the end of that part of the dream, I was just really sad for her that she couldn't recognize what was being offered. And then also had this feeling of, is it even worth it for you guys making all these sacrifices and all this time for all these people that the majority of them don't even end up accepting these houses, and they sell it for whatever they can get out of it? And anyway, then it goes to the second part of this dream. And I don't really know what this one means. It's kind of random, but I walked up to one of my high school friends, and she was working with a film crew for a reality TV show. And they were having her do this performance of singing a specific song, and they had choreographed a dance for her to do. And she's doing it at the top of this flight of stairs outside. It was like in a park. Anyway, the dance and the song had a good message, but they weren't really, they didn't really reflect her or her personality. But she was okay with it because it was a good message and it still conveyed what she was hoping for. But we ended up just laughing hysterically because it was just kind of cheesy and stoic, and that just wasn't her personality at all. So kind of weird second part. Then the third part, this is the part that I had shared with you, Bryce. I was standing in the middle of an ocean, and it was really cold. It was gray. It was windy. You could just hear the water. It was really loud hearing the water because there was this huge storm. And I was looking around for people, and I saw a woman holding her daughter in her arms. And I felt like she was my friend, but she didn't know me in the dream. My feet could touch the ground, but the water was up to my ribs. And I was really stressed because I knew that I needed to get back to shore. And it was my job to get people that were in the ocean back to shore. And when I was calling out to this woman because I saw her, but she didn't see me. And I kept calling and calling, and I was getting nervous because I knew, the storm was progressing, and I knew that there was a chain in the water, and it was a chain connected to a cable that had other bits of a chain, and then a logger cable that went all the way to the shore. And I knew it was under the water somewhere, and it was in the vicinity that I was in. And I wanted to go closer to the woman, and so I'd walk closer to her, but I was scared to leave this chain. And I didn't know precisely where it was, but I knew that once I walked in the vicinity and put my hand under the water, that I would be able to find it. Anyway, so I'm panicking because it's getting more intense, and she finally sees me, and she starts walking towards me, and I'm like, hurry up, come on, and feeling like that. I'm not telling her that. But she gets close enough to me, and I knew that she had like an anchor, like a backpacking anchor that you clip to the lines. I knew she had that on her. And so I knew that I would be able to find this chain and connect her to it. And then I would be able to hold on to her, and we would be able to go back. And as she's getting closer to me, I hurry and grab her anchor, and I'm frantically looking for the chain under the water, and I finally find it. And as I find it and I'm reaching it up, I can feel the ocean pulling us farther back, and because this huge wave is coming, and I attach her to it. And right as I do, I know that a huge wave is going to come and go over us, like overtake us. And I tell her right as I'm doing it, hold on. even when this wave comes over us, hold on, we'll be able to get back to shore. So that was the dream. And then I woke up.
So Sky, with the 3-part dream, what's your initial, what are the overarching themes that you took away from it?
I don't know. I really pondered and prayed a lot about this dream because it did feel so symbolic and it felt like a message to me. I considered, is it me in all of the different stages? Is it, reflections of different spiritual places that I've been? Also part of the third part is I was the one calling out to the woman, but then there was also a part where I saw things from her perspective. Like I was the woman with the child lost at sea. And then there was a part that I could see it overhead, kind of like I was watching it from a movie. So I considered that. But one of the things that really bothered me was that while I was calling out to these people in the sea, that I knew that they had an anchor on them, but I didn't. And it made me think of a conflict that I have in my life of, I don't know where I stand with God. I haven't had my own personal declaration. I don't feel completely secure, and I want to, but I also feel like I'm called to, and it's necessary to call out to those who I can and to try and gather and love and minister. I mean, you look at the Sermon on the Mount, you look at the scriptures, and we're constantly told to do that. But then at the same time, I feel like, well, who am I? I don't even have my own direct connection. And am I, should I secure that first? Anyway, I had been praying a lot about that, and we were moving, and I picked up the Teaching and Commandments book to put it in a box, and it just happened to open up to this one page, and it was TNC 171, and I had a note on it. So I have this part of the paragraph that's highlighted, and I'll read that to you. And I have this note by it that says Jacob 5. It reminds me of Jacob 5. So the highlighted part says, they are the field I have been sent to harvest. They are prepared and ready. For this season, I have come to this place. These people will accept a new dispensation and the truth. And this is the part that's underlined that I read. Anyone who helps me with the Father's work in harvesting souls will likewise save their own soul. The harvest saves both the planter and the gatherer together. Remember the expression, one plants and another harvests. I sent you to help with the harvest, but others have prepared this field. The prophets planted, and these people have responded, and you joined the labor of the prophets by now teaching these prepared people. So I thought that kind of answered one of the conflicts I was having of, who am I to be reaching out or trying to teach the things that I understand, even though I don't have concrete confirmation that I myself have any standing. But that's it. So
Thank you. I don't want to interpret your dream. It's yours. There's a couple the reason why I thought it was really interesting when I heard it in the summer was this line back to the beach, kind of what this picture is illustrating. But it is also interesting that the first part of your dream represented a house,
mm-hmm.
and the second part of your dream represented a song. I'd recommend, Sky, that after this or sometime, in private, go read the book of Revelation about this song, the song of the 144,000, the song of redeeming love. I that has some significant symbolism as well.
Oh, cool. Yeah,
But
I will. Thank you for
yeah,
sharing your thoughts on that. And also, the date that I had the dream was March 26th. So, in case anyone's curious.
there you go.
Yeah.
Okay. Um, okay. I was just gonna say March 26th. That's a good day. Okay. But let's continue. Thank you, Sky, for that.
Yeah.
Whenever a work is occupied, we've talked essentially about the beginnings of a work. The beginnings of the work require someone or a couple to be redeemed. You cannot do the work of God in an active role without someone on earth that has been in their presence. Everything else is just conjecture. It's guesswork. It's mining historical documents to determine if Joseph Smith was a polygamist or not. I mean, it is conjecture, it's science, it's the work of the scribes and the Pharisees, because it's not living, it's not from heaven. The signs, like when you turn on a light bulb or when you start watering a garden, you're going to get what happens, and then you're going to get ripple effects. And those ripple effects the ripple effect is going to be knowledge which expands and fills, gifts of the Spirit, and power in the priesthood. Where those things are lacking, you don't have an active connection to heaven. You don't have that line back to the beach. You aren't connected back into the way God connects with his family here on earth. So let me quickly read a scripture. Already did that one. This is what I wanted to highlight with your experience, Sky, and this is just back to what Nephi said to Joseph Smith this September of 1823. And he talked about turning your hearts to the fathers to the children. If not so, the whole earth would be utterly wasted at his coming. This scripture is not related to genealogical work. This scripture is related to the beachhead. It is related to the line. Sorry, I wanted to talk about this before. It is related to the line back to the beach. If we're floating out here in the great deep, then we need something to anchor us, to connect us back to the heavens. The promises and covenants that God makes with those who he has brought into this type of relationship is that. Now, the sign would be knowledge, gifts of the Spirit, and power in the priesthood. If you don't have that, if you aren't connected to angels, if you're not connected to Christ, if all of this is just hearsay and you're tossed to and fro and carried about with every wind of doctrine, you don't have it. So this is also what Nephi talked about. Nephi quoted Joel, and I wanted to read Joel, what Nephi quoted. And it shall come to pass afterward, I will pour out my spirit upon all flesh. And your sons and your daughters shall prophesy, and your old men shall dream dreams, your young men shall see visions. And also upon the servants and upon the handmaids in those days will I pour out my spirit. Now the pessimist or the contrarian would say, well, Peter said this on the day of Pentecost. Yeah, he did. Anytime there is an active work in the garden of God, these things are connected. If there is an assignment, if there's a house, if there's an active work with heaven and earth, these will always accompany it. if it falls into disrepair, if it goes away, we know that that then is the symbol and the sign that the heavens are withdrawing, that this isn't happening anymore. And that is going to be what's going to let you know. The whole point is that if you have something active, you have knowledge that's expanding, it's growing. It's not a sunset, it's a sunrise. And the sunrise is getting higher up in the heavens, not dipping and making everybody less knowledgeable. Everybody's growing in light and truth. Everybody's gaining understanding. The heavens and earth are coming closer and closer together, so knowledge is continuing to grow. As a byproduct of the heavens getting closer, you get the gift of wisdom, the gift of knowledge, the gift of, and you can go through all of those gifts that Paul writes to the Corinthians about, or what Moroni writes in his expose in the book of Moroni. You get all of the gifts of the Spirit. In addition, you get power in the priesthood, meaning that you're being governed by the powers of heaven. The heavens are actively engaged in what you're doing. Angels are communicating assignments and responsibilities. Christ is actively working in his garden, and the Father is actively attending. These things are always connected. If you don't see that, you know that it's not there. The whole purpose is to produce fruit. And like what you read, Sky, we are the fruit. The gods in the heavens, they're already in the heavens. They're already there. They've already received their salvation. They are the noble and great ones that Abraham talked about. We know that God's there. We know that Michael and Gabriel and Raphael are there. It's our turn to prove in this mortal experience if we are going to be natural fruit. Are we going to heed the counsels of the heavens? And are we going to conform to what that looks like? Are we going to be like Abraham and receive commandments, not a few, and be a follower of righteousness? But this goes back to the vineyard, Jacob 3. And it came to pass that the Lord of the vineyard sent his servant, and the servant went and did as the Lord had commanded him, and brought other servants, and they were few. And the Lord of the vineyard said unto them, Go to and labor in the vineyard with your mights. For behold, this is the last time that I shall nourish my vineyard, for the end is nigh at hand, and the season speedily cometh. And if ye labor with your mights with me, ye shall have joy in the fruit which I shall lay up unto myself against the time which will soon come. The fruit is us. Now, this is essentially the resume. This is what you should see if something is happening. There should be someone that acts as the surrogate of God here on earth. You should see an Adam. You should see a Noah. You should see a Abraham. If there's something active, you should see an Isaac, a Jacob, or a Joseph. You should see a Nephi or a Lehi. You should see a Peter, a James, or a John. Their work will communicate where they're getting their knowledge, their wisdom, their assignment. This would then produce natural fruit. Now, the next thing is that we all die. So to continue the work, the first thing is to perpetuate the family. It is to perpetuate that opportunity, because it isn't a given. It doesn't just naturally flow from one person to another. It doesn't just naturally flow through a church office or through a succession of a succession crisis. It must happen the same way, meaning if you have someone go to the top of the mountain, you must have the next person do the same thing. There's no inheritance tax. There's no inheritance blessings. I'm not given anything. Nobody's getting given anything. It must be done again to receive the same blessing, the same right, the same restoration. So in the Lectures on Faith, Lecture 6, paragraph 5 through 7, for a man to lay down his all, his character and reputation, his honor and applause, his good name, among men, his houses, his lands, his brothers and sisters, his wife and children, and even his own life also, counting all things but filth and dross for the excellency of the knowledge of Christ, requires more than mere belief or supposition that he is doing the will of God, but actual knowledge, realizing that when these sufferings are ended, he will enter the eternal rest and be a partaker of the glory of God. For unless a person does know that he is walking according to the will of God, it would be offering an insult to the dignity of the Creator were he to say that he would be partaker of his glory when he should be done with the things of this life. But when he has this knowledge and most assuredly knows that he is doing the will of God, his confidence can be equally strong that he will be a partaker of the glory of God. Let us here observe that a religion that does not require the sacrifice of all things never has power sufficient to produce the faith necessary unto life and salvation. For from the first existence of man, the faith necessary unto the enjoyment of life and salvation shall never could be obtained without the sacrifice of all earthly things. It was through this sacrifice and this only that God has ordained that man should enjoy eternal life, and it is through the medium of the sacrifice of all earthly things that men do actually know that they are doing the things which are well-pleasing in the sight of God. When a man has offered in sacrifice all that he has for the true sake, not even withholding his life, and believing before God that he has been called to make this sacrifice because he seeks to do his will, he does know by most assuredly that God does and will accept his sacrifice and offering, and that he has not nor will not see his face in vain. Under these circumstances, then, he can obtain the faith necessary for him to lay hold on eternal life. Okay. Woo! That's a lot. The whole point. This is not a given. You don't just receive the blessings of God, obtain these blessings, and then just hand it off. You don't have to, I did the work. So you don't have to. Sounds like the plan of Satan. You must do the same sacrifice. Isaac must do the same sacrifice to receive the right and to perpetuate the covenant and to receive the same blessing. This is how it works. The next is there is the difference between the house and the family. The family has the right. It is always within a family that the right is given. But the house, like we talked about with Adam and the house of Adam, the household can receive blessings. Now, do you think it's a coincidence that there is a bush or maybe a tree, I don't know what it looked like, that was on fire? That Moses saw on Mount Sinai. God works within his houses and lights it on fire, lights the Holy Spirit within the house. And the house perpetuates the blessings received based off of the father, in this case, Father Jacob. But let's read this. This is Genesis chapter 12, paragraph 41. This is the covenant and blessing that Joseph received, but also his father Jacob would have received the same. And the Lord swore unto Joseph that he would preserve his seed forever, saying, I will raise up Moses, and a rod shall be in his hand, and he shall gather together my people, and he shall lead them as a flock, and he shall smite the waters of the Red Sea with his rod, And he shall have judgment, and shall write the word of the Lord. And he shall not speak many words, for I will write on him my law by the finger of my own hand. And I will make a spokesman for him, and his name shall be called Aaron. And it shall be done unto you in the last days also, even as I have sworn. Okay? So God then organizes this house, and within the organization of this house, he can organize it whatever way that he wants. This really leads off to Mike. Would you mind sharing?
Sure. So I think that the best approach for this right now would be if we looked at in the T&C section 154, we looked at some of the comments that are in there, and we perhaps build on them a little bit more. Looking at paragraph 1 and looking at through the lens of what we've been talking about today, I'd like to address the notion of dispensation and the use of that word, and see if we can maybe reframe some things a little bit. So it says, when God delivers the dispensation of the gospel to the earth, the head of that dispensation is granted the right and privilege of organizing the dispensation. This is using some more familiar Mormon vernacular, but to look at it in the light of what we're talking about today, you could perhaps reframe this to say something to the effect of, when God delivers the gospel by covenant to somebody who is to be the head of a household on the earth, the head of that household is granted the right and privilege of organizing their household. So as the head of their dispensation, or the head of this household, organizes it according to the righteous principles and receives God's approval of the pattern, then the household is established and remains in effect until apostasy necessitates another restoration. So Adam was the first, and Adam received his dispensation, his household, with the gospel by covenant from God. And this covenant and this arrangement that he had between himself and God involved a covenant that was come to by mutual agreement between them. God established the terms of the covenant. Adam agreed, and in response, Adam was given the right of dominion over all of the earth as the head of the human family at that point in time. So the earth was his household, and he had the rights of stewardship, proprietorship, ownership over everything that was in the earth, according to the covenant that he and God had established between themselves. In this role, one of the rights, one of the privileges that Adam was granted as the steward and proprietor over the earth was establishing his household as he best saw fit to be in accordance with the goals and aims of the gospel. And he determined that what seemed wisest in his eyes, and God agreed and approved, was for him to pattern things after the order of heaven. So one of the things that's interesting about that is, as you study Adam and what he did and the pattern that he laid out, that tells you what the pattern looks like in heaven. So Adam, he taught his children about the gospel, and he dealt with generations of apostasy. He was a member of what came to be known as the Holy Order. He had the fullness of the priesthood. He was after the Holy Order, after the Order of the Son of God. But his children, for a time, seemed disinterested in accepting what he was teaching, and it took time before they had their first appearance of what would be a worthy child that Adam could name to be his successor when he would eventually leave the earth. Cain appeared to be worthy. Eve, in her role of recognizing who should be appointed as the successor, viewed Cain as their most promising of children when he came along. But we know that Cain, eventually rebelled and turned, and he slew Abel. When Abel was proving himself to be more righteous and therefore more worthy to become the next head of the household when Adam would leave. So Cain slew Abel, wanting to retain for himself the notion of being heir apparent to Adam. In response to that, there was a replacement given, who was Seth. You can see the lineage being tracked a little further in section 154, in paragraphs 9 through 20. It kind of tracks all that content about how this was handed down. But some principles involved with that, that tell us how Adam did things, which in turn tells us how things were done in heaven. When Adam appointed Seth, Seth was not the oldest child. He was not the literal firstborn child of Adam, but he was the first child who came to be fully worthy. He was therefore considered the heir apparent, and it established this concept of a role, which is the role of the firstborn. Like Adam himself was the firstborn man in this world. So Seth, being righteous, being the oldest of the righteous, being appointed to become the father of the household when Adam would depart, he had other relatives, other brothers who were older than him, likely had nephews, and perhaps even generations of nephews who might have been older than him. We don't have all the details of that, but he was not the oldest. He was simply the oldest worthy in the next generation down from Adam. And this became a pattern that was followed from Adam through several generations, where the oldest righteous, worthy male was named to be the appointed heir. And this is a pattern that we see as you move down from Adam. The next kind of head of a household, generational head that we talk about in any sort of distinct manner is Abraham. So things had moved down in a pretty seamless fashion from Adam through his generations down to Shem or Melchizedek. But when we came to Abraham and we come to Shem and Melchizedek, we don't necessarily have any details telling us that Shem had no worthy son to pass it on to. It is possible that his children were worthy to join him in ascending to Zion and chose to do so, or something to that effect. We don't We don't have details on Shem's lineage beneath him. But what we do know is that Abraham, he became distinct in that he was not he was not the next son of Shem. He had a different father who had been an apostate, went and pursued other gods. But Abraham qualified himself, and he became, in essence, the first adopted son into this lineage of firstborn head of household fathers being appointed by Melchizedek. And Abraham, as we see in paragraph 3 of section 154, he followed Adam's example, trying to pattern his family in the same manner as Adam. So the oldest worthy son for the generations from Abraham was named to be the appointed head of the household, and was expected to follow the same pattern. So this is why you can see in the generations coming down from from Abraham, it goes to Isaac instead of Ishmael. It goes to Jacob instead of Esau. It goes to Joseph instead of his older brothers. This right of the government of the human family under Adam. Moses, when he came into the picture in paragraph 4, he got faced with a different situation. Moses arose and sought to bring the children of Israel into God's presence. And the situation he was faced with when they came to the mountain where they were invited to ascend and to meet with God, the children rejected the opportunity to ascend. And so Moses, looking at his situation where he was as the head of this family at this point in time, made a decision and went and worked this through with God to use a different pattern, because he had nobody that he could appoint in the same way to be the head of the household of God beneath him. So instead, he designed with God what we call the Mosaic Law, with that pattern where the priesthood was confined to a single lineage, the intent being to try to symbolically point people's minds to higher truths of the things that Adam had established, that Abraham had honored, to try and prepare people's minds and retain that information until perhaps a righteous generation could arise. What he designed, rather than being about ascent, you could perhaps say it was about maintenance and trying to keep the engine running until somebody could come along and become a new head of the household. And what he established was very resilient. It lasted for hundreds and hundreds of years, all the way down to the time of John the Baptist and Jesus Christ. So in paragraph 5, where we get to Jesus Christ, well, yes, we touch a little bit on the end of paragraph 4, where John the Baptist had to bring Moses's temporary tent in the wilderness sort of household to a close. The maintenance approach had kept many teachings and principles around, but it had not succeeded in helping people to ascend and become new heads of households. And so this very resilient house, or part of a house, might be more appropriate. The ruins remained in place. We still have ruins now from civilizations thousands of years ago that you can look at as a kind of literal symbol of, yeah, here's still remains of buildings, you know, that are still sticking around. Here's part of a wall that's sticking around. That was what had remained, and the time came where John the Baptist was appointed to put an end to the decrepit, broken, unsustainable house, so that Christ was able to come in and be established by, you know, covenant and by, you know, perhaps his right as the creator and as the savior to be the head of a new household. And interestingly, Christ did not establish his household, his dispensation, according to the self-same pattern of Adam and Abraham. He instead established a pattern that pointed to those. When he had Peter, James, and John selected, they represented Abraham, Isaac, and Jacob. You know, the 12 apostles represented the 12 tribes of Israel. The 70s that he appointed represented the 70 who went into Egypt. And interestingly, with the reflection of Peter, James, and John, or Peter, Jacob, and John, representing Abraham, Isaac, and Jacob, Peter was, like Abraham, the head of the household. And then after Peter, Jacob, like Isaac, became head of the household. And then after Jacob, John became, like Jacob, the head of the household, until John, rather than dying, he disappeared from the public scene. But as we know from in the New Testament, he had been given power by Jesus to remain on the earth as a ministering angel, and his continued presence here behind the scenes to some major degree may have played a role in keeping mankind from utterly destroying ourselves during this period of, you know, what Mormonism has called the Great Apostasy, which was after Jesus Christ and the apostles. But John kept, in some sense, the motor running until finally we could have a new head of a household come along. And the one that we know of next, Joseph Smith Jr. Joseph became the head of a household. And, you know, as with all those before him, it was really Joseph and Emma who were the parents, the heads of this household. And Joseph, initially, what he put together and what the Lord approved was honoring the pattern that Christ established, which again was pointing back to the beginning, was pointing back to Adam and what he had. But interestingly, Joseph, while that is the pattern that he began with, this New Testament model organization, he also established separately within this organization something new, which was through his brother Hiram, this role of priesthood and patriarch. And it became known in the LDS church that came through Brigham Young's leadership and his successors, the office of presiding patriarch, which was reserved to Hiram's sons. It's very interesting because Joseph essentially used the New Testament model as soil to try and plant something that was patterned after Adam's organization and Abraham's organization, where a family line with a head of that family was appointed by God in January of 1841. Hiram was appointed to become the head of the family, which is very interesting in that Joseph, perhaps you could say, qualified first in that role, but his older brother arose and became worthy to fill that role. And Joseph, in his humility, honored that and did his part in obeying God and making his older, worthy, righteous brother the head of the human family on earth. And this perhaps could have become what was prophesied to be in the end days, which is the priesthood that Adam had established, the order that Adam had established, which followed the order that's found in heaven. And Hiram, his lineage could have filled that. It could have been done, born through the LDS Church organization. That potential was in place, but instead what we see happened was that that office and the lineage that filled that office, the understanding of what was taking place was not only neglected, it was ultimately abandoned. And with that abandonment, that hope, that design of having a family patterned after Adam's priesthood, after Adam's household, that disappeared from the LDS Church, with perhaps in part with placing that role in the church into an emeritus status, but then definitively with the death of Hiram's descendant who had filled that role, Eldred Smith. So with that, it was the end of that household, Joseph's household attempt that he had put together. It had lasted in some degree, but it had also become dilapidated, fallen into disrepair, the same as Joseph described in his last vision, his last dream, where he was visiting the farm and he saw that it had fallen into neglect and disrepair, and he ultimately left a group of men fighting with divisive knives to claim ownership of the farm while he simply walked away. But as happened with John the Baptist having to dismantle a resilient house that Moses had established, the same can happen and has happened since. The house disorganization, according to an order and pattern, has unfolded to a point, and we are now coming to or are in perhaps the household of David being established, and that kind of brings us to the present and where we're at now, and what you're talking about, Bryce. And this would bring us, in theory, from the point of talking about this topic in historical terms to present and future terms. And so that's kind of what I've got to share on that.
Love it. Thank you so much, Mike. And you broke this down so clear. And that's why, one thought before I continue, just to add to what you've said, there's no such thing as restoring a New Testament church. There's no such thing as restoring something else. These heads of households, Adam, Abraham, Moses, Christ, Joseph Smith, they organize their household according to the need of the day. They may decide that they want granite countertops because they want granite countertops. They may decide that they want a large family room because they have a large family. They may decide that they want to downsize and they want to go to a small house, and maybe they want to go downsize so much that their kids don't come and mooch off of them. So they make their house so small that it only fits the parents. The household is designed specifically for the needs of the day. There is no such thing as restoring a New Testament church. It is organizing the household to fulfill a specific requirement, need, goal, purpose, assignment, whatever it may be. And God gives these mothers and fathers, these heads of households, the liberty and opportunity to figure out what would be best within the circumstances that they're residing in.
Yeah. One last point that I want to point out as well is at the very end of section 154, the very last paragraph, I wanted to note this too, because after having laid this all out, we are given a little piece of prophecy that explain, this same priesthood, which was in the beginning, this same order, this pattern of the household of Adam, which mirrored the order of heaven, it says, it shall be in the end of the world also. If that is true, then you can use that, as you talked about signs of things happening. You can use that as a helpful evaluative tool in trying to determine if what you are seeing is the end times and is the household of God. If you're looking at an organization, a body, a household that is not patterned after Adam's, that is not patterned after the order of heaven, then you are either looking at something that is not the household of God, or you are at a point in time that is not the end of the world, or perhaps both of those are true. But, take your pick. The reality is, if we are indeed reaching the end times, then there is going to be a priesthood order that matches Adam's, that matches the order of heaven, that will be established, and you will have to be able to identify that and recognize, accept it, and seek to become a part of it if you want to be a part of the household of God.
Perfect. Thank you so much. All right. We just have a couple things left. A couple quick thoughts about the household or the house. When there is a house, that house is always connected. They're bound together by the body, by the law, by the covenant, and by ordinance. Now, let me explain what I mean by that. Let me read two things. This is from Isaiah chapter 7, paragraph 1. The earth also is defiled under the inhabitants thereof, because they have transgressed the laws, changed the ordinance, broken the everlasting covenant. Therefore has the curse devoured the earth, and they that dwell therein are desolate. Therefore the inhabitants of the earth are burned, and few men left. Okay? One more. Oh, is there one more? Oh, sorry. That was it. I wanted to highlight there. I had one more, but we're not going to talk about it today. But Isaiah talked about how the earth is defiled. We frequently refer to ordinances like baptism or going to an LDS temple or something like that. But an ordinance is anything that God ordains. that he gives his stamp of approval for. So how do you break apart the house? And Michael talked about, if this is not like this, then you probably don't have it. If the ordained body is no longer or the body that it was, maybe you're consolidating priesthood quorums, or you're removing a presiding patriarch. If you remove the ordained body, you break apart the house. If you break apart the law, if you do not adhere to the law that house is ordained by, you break apart the house. If Zacharias gets murdered between the altar and the temple, that frees up opportunity to have that house closed. If the requirements of or using priesthood by persuasion, long-suffering, gentleness, meekness, love unfeigned, kindness, the section from the LDS Doctrine and Covenants 121, if that is broken, you break yourself upon the law that this house is operating within, and you free up the house. If you change the covenant, you break apart the house. If you change the ordinances, you change them because you feel like you're freelancing, and you can do that. And you can change the ordinances all day long because you hold a position of authority in a hierarchy. You break apart the house. You open it up, you break it apart. It no longer has the same sanction from heaven. Okay? So ultimately, as you look at this house, it's either building or it's getting dismantled. There's no in between. In this realm, in this world, everything has a half-life. And the house of God is either getting built on, and like we talked about earlier, the covenant is getting renewed because of sacrifice, because it's the same sacrifice that the one who had the covenant originally. You're doing the same thing. You're becoming Isaac, you're becoming Jacob, you're becoming Joseph, or the house is getting dismantled. And I'm going to read this because this is so frequent. Mosiah chapter 11, paragraph 18. And now it came to pass that there were many of the rising generation that could not understand the words of King Benjamin. Being little children at the time, he spake unto his people, and they did not believe the tradition of their fathers. They did not believe what had been said concerning the resurrection of the dead, neither did they believe concerning the coming of Christ. And now because of their unbelief, they could not understand the word of God, and their hearts were hardened, and they would not be baptized, neither would they join the church. And they were a separate people as to their faith, and remained so ever after, even in their carnal and sinful state. For they would not call upon the Lord their God. And now in the reign of Mosiah, they were not half so numerous as the people of God, but because of dissensions among their brethren, they became more numerous. When you start seeing this happen, that is exactly the sign. When people start dissenting, because there's nothing connecting them. They don't know what they actually believe. They don't actually believe the religion. And they are using itching ears because they're kept from the truth, because they know not where to find it. And you see that. You see that today. You see that within Mormonism, within LDS Mormonism. They do not understand what their religion actually was because there's too many lies, too many half-truths, too many weak arguments for them to actually do the work and figure it out. Now, we talked about this with Michael. ultimately the school year needs to come to a close and a new school year needs to start. It just doesn't go on forever and ever. If you break the covenants, if you break the law, if you disorganize the body and change it, the dispensation comes to an end. The house comes to an end. The dispensation will not continue, even if you put fancy language in front of it. It will retire and something new will begin. And that's just the factor of how God works. There's one or two, a couple last signs of when this happens. What would you expect? One is from 2 Nephi chapter 12, paragraph 1. And they deny the power of God and the Holy One of Israel, and they say unto men, hearken unto us and our precept. For behold, there is no God today, for the Lord, the Redeemer, has done his work, and he hath given his power unto man. Behold, hearken ye unto my precept. If they shall say there is a miracle wrought by the hand of the Lord, believe it not. For this day he is not a God of miracles, he has done his work. And then finally, God's house is a house of order, and he will dismantle it. If there is a generation that is rising that does not believe the original the original message, he will take it from that dispensation. He will take it from that rising generation. If the leaders of that rising generation think that they can do anything because God has given his power unto man, he will take it from the leadership. It is not theirs. The one who sacrificed to build the house wasn't them. So, finishing it up, the whole goal is reconnecting these branches, these houses, back to the King of Kings, the house, the mayor of the city of houses, and that is Jesus Christ. So I'm going to finish with this. I am the true vine, or the head of the Father's family, and my Father is the husbandman over the family. Every branch connected to me that does not produce fruit, he will remove, and every branch that produces fruit, he will prune back so that it produces better fruit. You will bear fruit if you follow the things I have taught you. Stay connected to me as part of the heavenly family, and I will nourish you. Just as a branch cannot produce fruit if it is not connected to the vine, neither will you be able to bear fruit unless you remain connected with me. I am the vine, and you are the branches. You that stay connected to me and I to him will be abundantly fruitful. But without the connection to me, you will perish. If a man loses his connection with me, he is merely a withered branch, and men will take the withered branches, cut them away, and burn them. If you say, stay connected to me, and my words live in you, you will ask according to my will, and you will be given the ability to accomplish my will. It will please and vindicate my Father if you produce abundant fruit, and that will prove you follow me. Just like the Father has followed me, I have in turn likewise followed you. Therefore, remain connected with me, and my love will be with you. If you practice my teachings, you will always remain connected with me, just as I have kept my Father's teachings and have remained connected with him. Jesus Christ is the true vine. We need to connect to him. He works through order. He works through reflecting the image of heaven on earth. He does that reflection by organizing households and families. And he is continuing to do his work. And that is the end of this webinar. We'd love to stop, answer any questions. One question was asked, what are the elements of a household of God? Mike, you can add to this, but let me add a thought. Within any family, there's a father and a mother who have been given the right to be the presiding father and mother on earth, essentially a surrogate of God the Father and God the Mother. Outside of that, in every household, things are given to accomplish what that is needed. This includes covenant land, temples, or a temple, a family, a household. There's differences throughout, and it's based off of the circumstances and the needs. But the resume that we talked about, those are the necessities. They need to have partaken of the fruit. They need to have sacrificed. They need to have a covenant between them and a woman. They need to be endowed by knowledge. If they don't have knowledge, if they don't have a covenant, if they have not sacrificed, if they have not been in the presence of God, they don't fit the prototype. All right. Any other thoughts, Sky or Mike?
I don't have any. I think this is good for this for first installment.
Okay.
Yeah, just thank you for inviting me to this and the open discussion and questions and pondering and answers and all that. It's good stuff.
Okay. Thanks, everyone. Have a wonderful day. Enjoy the rest of the Sabbath.
You too. Thanks. Bye.